Okay guys, welcome back to another video. My name's Dagget. This is Dagget Designs, and in today's video we're doing a bit of a paint along session. So to start off with, if you'd like to download the reference image here, you can trace this out onto a piece of watercolor paper. There'll be a link in the description where you can download this. Now, as always, I'm starting off with black shading using Liquitex Carbon Black, and I am painting with Liquitex acrylic inks and Taklon synthetic brushes, but feel free to use whatever medium you like. Now, as the title suggests, I'm going to be giving you guys my 5 tips to practice drawing and to keep up with your art practice even when you are really busy. Now, this is something that I've struggled with a lot in the past, is trying to find time between working full-time, creating YouTube videos, practicing my own art as well as teaching art, and sort of, being able to find the time to sit and practice, because a lot of the time, if you're working, even if you're an artist that's working and you're creating commission artworks and you are maybe teaching other people how to draw, you don't get to spend a lot of time practicing your own art. So this is what I'm going to be talking about, and 5 different tips for you guys to still practice your art, still get your practice in even if you are busy. So tip number 1 is finding art friends or spending time with other artists. Now, I've been really lucky and fortunate to have a really good friend of mine that's an artist, and he's a tattoo artist, and so we spend quite a bit of time together. We're always talking about art, and we sometimes give each other challenges, or we get together and we come up with a project idea on something, and this keeps me accountable because I always feel like, his art is progressing, he's getting better at his craft. I need to have something to show him when we meet up and talk, and I need to be able to relate and chat with him, and the way that we communicate is through our art primarily. And so spending time with other artists or around other artists is really important. It's going to broaden your ideas and open up your mind to various ideas, sharing tips and techniques, different mediums that you can use. And most importantly, it's going to keep you accountable, which means, you're not going to be stuck in this rut of like every day you want to draw, you want to practice drawing, but you never get anything done. If you have some art friends, even if they're not in person, but someone that you can FaceTime and do a drawing session with, or maybe some art friends online, like a group that you're in, if you're in an art group on Facebook or something, then you feel a little bit more accountable to share work with those within that group or that friend circle. Another really great way in terms of a community that you can start to be a little bit more accountable for your own practice and get a little bit more time for your art in is to start a social media page such as Instagram or Facebook. Now, it doesn't have to be a public page where you're advertising it if you're not into that sort of thing. It can just be something for family and friends. But in this way, you feel a little bit accountable to be posting on that account. You want to show people that you're working, show people that you're practicing, especially if you are aiming towards a higher goal. If you want to take your art to a professional level, or if you're interested in becoming a tattoo artist, for example, you need to be practicing consistently. And a really good way to stay accountable is to have a social media page where people are expecting to see you post. Okay, so tip number 2 is going to be focused practice sessions. So what does this mean? This essentially means that you don't try to draw everything in one session, right? So instead of trying to draw, I'm going to look at it from the perspective of what I do, which is primarily, Japanese tattoo style illustration or Japanese inspired illustration. Instead of trying to practice, especially in the beginning, instead of trying to practice by drawing an entire dragon, including the body and the scales and everything, and flowers and waves, and rocks, and all the different subject matter, which I think a lot of people do in trying to create a piece of art. I think a better way to practice, especially if you're limited on time, is choose one skill set. Let's say that's drawing finger waves, and you really want to get good at drawing finger waves. So really knuckle down and spend, all the practice time that you get for art, however limited that is, spend all of that time working on that one skill of drawing finger waves. Then once you feel competent and comfortable at drawing finger waves, you can then move on to the next skill. Let's say that's drawing the dragon head. And then from there, you can slowly build on your skill set by practicing only one skill per session. This reduces the amount of practice that you need to do overall, because you're sort of breaking down a large illustration into smaller steps, making it easier to tackle. And on top of that, it's easier to stay focused. So, if you've only got 10 or 15 minutes, let's say, per day to practice your art or less, then, if you're practicing consistently, that's super important. So if you practice drawing finger waves for 15 minutes every day, I can guarantee you, if you're practicing in the right way, that after a week or 2 weeks, you're going to really feel comfortable drawing finger waves. You're going to feel like you have your own method down that works for you. And then you can move on to learning sort of the next stage. Let's say, like I said, the dragon head or something like that. And by the end of a couple months practice, you'll be able to put together a complete illustration. Whereas if you try to draw that complete illustration from start to finish every time you practice, you'll never feel like you're making the progress that you want to make. So I would say tip number 2 is focus on one skill set per practice session. Tip number 3 is to limit the size of your drawings or your illustrations. A really great way to do this, specifically if you are into tattoo style art, which I would assume, being that you're on my channel, that's what you're into. If you are into tattoo style art, then doing something like a flash sheet is a really good way to get in some art, because it's a project that you can slowly work away at. It can be quite daunting if you pull out a really large sheet of paper, like an A2 size sheet of paper, to do a large illustration, and you only get the main body of the koi fish done, but you don't get the scales done, you don't get any of the details done, you just get your sketch down, and then your practice time's up. You don't have any more time to practice art. You feel like you're never ever going to finish that piece of art, and look, you probably won't unless you're one of those people that can come back to the same thing over and over and over again. You're probably going to get bored of looking at it after a couple of weeks or a month or something like that. So a really good way to practice is to create flash sheets, which is small designs that don't take too long to draw or to paint. And this way you can fill up a sheet with smaller designs, and you're still getting a little bit of practice in each time you add a design to the sheet. So in that way you can sit down, only feel like you have to draw something small, like the size of your palm or the size of your hand, on the sheet, and that's all your commitment for the day. You don't have to commit to doing a really big drawing session or practice session, especially if you are limited on time. So that's going to be tip number 3, is limit the size of your artwork. Do smaller pieces of art. Now that brings me perfectly into step 4, or tip number 4, which is how to manage your dead time and keeping a sketchbook. I think it's really important to make sure that you're not wasting your dead time. I think a lot of us, including myself, are guilty of sitting and scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, and a lot of the time you might be looking at art. You might be on Instagram or Pinterest and looking at art, tattoos or tattoo flash, and thinking like, I really want to be able to draw that, I want to be able to practice that, but you're not consistently practicing. Or at least, I know from my own experience that in the past, there's been times where I would sit and scroll for hours, and you realize after a bit that you've just wasted half an hour, maybe an hour of time just sitting and looking at Facebook, social media in general. And so, really you've just wasted some valuable practice time. So, really pay attention to those dead moments. And the thing is, I understand. Some people, including myself, are really busy throughout the entire day. You don't have a lot of dead time, and you don't spend a lot of time on social media. And if that's you, try to find those 5-minute periods throughout the day where you're not doing anything, and have a sketchbook with you if you can. Whether you're at work and you're at your desk, or you're at home and you just have a sketchbook handy, all the time. Just have a sketchbook and a pencil with you, and whenever you have a dead spot of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, do a little bit of sketching. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. You don't have to create something amazing or, your next big painting, but just do a little bit of sketching. Just like I said, it's a focused practice session. So just choose something that you're trying to get good at. Let's say it's drawing roses, for example, and, play with your rose structure. Do 3 or 4 really quick thumbnail sketches of different rose shapes, and you'll find eventually that you'll start to build up like almost a book of ways that you like to draw certain things. And this is what's going to help you develop your own style. This is what's going to help you develop your own practice, so that each time you sit down to draw, you're already going to have a mental framework of how to draw these things because you've spent enough small and consistent sessions doing so. Consistency is key. I'm going to repeat that over and over again. Consistency is key. I would much rather do, 5 or 10 minutes practice or half an hour practice each day rather than do 1-2 hour session a week. And, that's not really enough, because it's not consistent enough. It takes time for muscle memory to set in, and you need to be visually and mentally engaged at all times to be progressing. So I think practicing your art each day is really important. Now, tip number 5 is something that you guys will probably be familiar with if you've ever looked at any goal setting or any sort of daily habit training, or, if you're trying to fix daily habits in your life, this is something you would have heard of. But the 5-minute rule is essentially you're going to sit down each day with the intention and the goal and a scheduled time to sit down and practice your art for just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. There's no other intention. You can set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes. And if you feel like stopping after 5 minutes, you're not feeling it, your practice isn't going well, you're too stressed, after 5 minutes, just stop. Just stop. Don't worry about it. You don't need to continue. You've done your 5 minutes per day, and that's all that counts. Now, what's important is that a lot of the time, you're going to feel like that 5 minutes went really fast, especially if you enjoy art, which, I presume you do. Otherwise, why would you be practicing and trying to get good at it? If you enjoy art, you're going to find that 5 minutes goes pretty quickly. And more often than not, at least in my experience, more often than not, you're going to want to continue drawing. So you will have spent that 5 minutes, you've timed yourself, and the alarm goes off, and you go, damn, it's been 5 minutes already. And you're going to want to keep drawing. You're going to want to keep developing what you're doing, developing on whatever idea came out in that 5 minutes, and you're going to want to keep drawing. So, you can allow yourself that extra 10 or 15 minutes, up to half an hour or an hour, whatever time frame you have. This is less for people that don't have time necessarily to draw. This is for people that are busy, maybe stressed out, and they have a really busy life. So that 5 minutes in the evening that they get, they'd rather sit on the couch and watch TV, which is totally fine. But yeah, just drawing for 5 minutes gives you the freedom to decide whether or not you want to keep going or whether you want to stop, and that's good. Now, my final thoughts on these 5 tips to practicing art even when you are busy is go easy on yourself, right? Take it easy on yourself. You've got to know when to push yourself and when to take it easy. And sometimes I think people are too hard on themselves. I think sometimes people are just lazy, including myself. That's something that we're all guilty of, is being lazy. But I think sometimes you've got to take it easy on yourself. You've got to give yourself a break and just practice when you can. But consistency is key. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.